In September 1900, Galveston was one of the most confident cities on the Gulf Coast. It had a busy harbor, elegant streets, rail connections, newspapers, hotels, and ambitions to become the great commercial doorway of Texas. The island was low, but prosperity made the risk feel manageable. People knew hurricanes existed, yet the exact track and strength of a storm over the Gulf were still difficult to prove in time. Weather messages moved slowly, politics shaped warnings, and local experience could turn into false confidence. When the sea began to rise, Galveston discovered that a city can be modern, proud, and almost defenseless at the same time. The storm that approached Galveston had already traveled through the Caribbean and across the Gulf of Mexico. Reports were incomplete, and forecasting in 1900 did not have satellites, aircraft reconnaissance, radar, or computer models. Meteorologists worked with ship observations, telegraph lines, barometers, and judgment. Some warnings reached the coast, but the full danger was not understood by many residents. The sky darkened, winds increased, and tides pushed higher. At first, the event could still be mistaken for severe weather that the island had survived before. That hesitation mattered. In disasters, the difference between a warning and a believed warning can become the difference between escape and burial. Galveston's geography made the city vulnerable in a brutal way. Much of the island sat only a few feet above sea level. A hurricane does not need to make land vanish. It only needs to lift the ocean and push it inland. Storm surge arrived as a moving wall of water mixed with waves, debris, sand, and wreckage. Streets became channels. Houses shifted from foundations. The beach moved into parlors and bedrooms. Families climbed to upper floors, then into attics, then onto roofs that might not hold. People were not fighting rain alone. They were trapped between wind above and water below, inside a city that had almost nowhere high to go. As night fell, the disaster became harder to comprehend. Wind tore apart buildings, and flying boards turned into weapons. The roar made communication nearly impossible. Neighbors could not always reach neighbors. Some people tied themselves together so they would not be swept away alone. Others crowded into stronger buildings, only to feel those structures shudder and break. The darkness hid the scale of destruction while making every sound terrifying. Survivors later described water filled with furniture, animals, timber, and bodies. The city was not simply flooded, it was being ground apart by the Gulf itself. The death toll remains one of the most terrible facts in American disaster history. Estimates usually place the number of dead around 6,000 to 8,000 people, and some counts go higher. Exact accounting was impossible because entire households disappeared, records were destroyed, and bodies were scattered across the island and bay. The heat after the storm created another crisis. Survivors had to clear wreckage, search for the missing, find water, prevent disease, and dispose of the dead quickly. The emotional burden was almost beyond language. Galveston had to mourn while performing the practical work of survival. Communication failures deepened the catastrophe. Telegraph lines went down, rail bridges were damaged, and the outside world did not immediately understand what had happened. When rescuers and reporters reached the island, they found a landscape of splintered lumber and stunned survivors. The disaster challenged the idea that progress alone could protect a city. Galveston had commerce, newspapers, and civic ambition, but it lacked a physical defense equal to its exposure. The storm made one lesson unavoidable. A coastal city cannot negotiate with storm surge using optimism. After the hurricane, Galveston made one of the most dramatic engineering responses in urban history. The city built a massive seawall and raised the grade of large parts of the island. Buildings were lifted, sand was pumped beneath them, and streets were elevated. The work was expensive, disruptive, and astonishing. It did reduce future storm risk, but it also showed the price of learning too late. The protection came after thousands had died. The seawall became a monument to resilience, but also a concrete reminder of the vulnerability that had been denied or underestimated before the storm. The storm also changed the economic future of Texas. Galveston recovered, but its position as the dominant port was weakened. Houston, farther inland and later connected by a ship channel, gained importance. Disasters can redirect commerce as surely as they destroy buildings. The hurricane did not only take lives, it shifted investment, confidence, and regional power. A single night helped alter the map of opportunity along the Gulf Coast. The story is therefore not only about weather. It is about how nature can expose the hidden assumptions beneath finance, infrastructure, and civic identity. In the years after the disaster, photographs became part of the evidence. They showed houses flattened into wooden fields, ships thrown from their places, families standing among wreckage, and streets that no longer looked like streets. These images matter because numbers alone can make catastrophe feel distant. A death toll tells scale, but a ruined doorway tells intimacy. The photographs also show how quickly memory can become selective. Civic boosters wanted recovery and confidence. Survivors carried trauma and absence. Between those needs, the camera preserved a harder truth. The city had been forced to rebuild on ground that had just proved how exposed it was. The Weather Service also had to reckon with the limits of its communication system. Forecasting is not only a scientific act, it is a chain that must move from observation to warning to public action. In 1900, that chain was thin. Messages could be delayed, filtered, disputed, or misunderstood. Local officials and residents had to decide what danger meant without the tools later generations would take for granted. The Galveston Hurricane therefore belongs to the history of meteorology as much as to the history of Texas. It showed that a warning system fails if accurate concern cannot travel faster than the storm. There were social differences in survival and recovery. Poor residents, black residents, immigrants, and workers often had fewer resources, weaker housing, and less political influence. Disaster stories can become simplified into images of a whole city suffering equally, but vulnerability is rarely equal. Who lives on the most exposed ground? Who receives help quickly? Who can rebuild? And whose losses are recorded all shape the real history. Galveston's tragedy belongs to every victim, but remembering it honestly means seeing the unequal conditions that made some lives more fragile before the first wave arrived. Today, the 1900 Galveston hurricane remains a warning for every coastal city facing stronger storms, rising seas, and expanding development near water. Forecasting has improved enormously, but warnings still require trust, evacuation routes, political courage, and respect for geography. A seawall can reduce danger, but it cannot make an island invulnerable. The ocean that entered Galveston in 1900 showed that disaster is not only a natural event. It is the meeting point of weather, place, decisions, memory, and denial. The night the ocean took Galveston still asks whether modern cities believe the water before it arrives.